Short chapters. I was in the Manhattan Beach Library over the summer. Beautiful place, by the way. They've rebuilt the whole thing. You have a commanding view from the top floor of the ocean, actually. Very nice. But they have one of these typical book bins where they're raising money for the Book Foundation or for the Friends of the Library or something like that, where they sell books that people have turned in. And so I found a James Patterson paperback there for 50 cents. I took it home. I'm not a fan of James Patterson, and many of you probably are. He's only the number one best-selling author in the world. That's Patterson. But I'm just not a fan. I think it feels contrived, coincidences. It doesn't do it for me. The characters don't come alive. It doesn't work for me. It's like watching, for me, it's like watching a B movie, just kind of a movie that moves along and there's action and it, to an extent, keeps you entertained. You don't really believe it. It doesn't resonate, or a kind of a weak TV series, but it certainly has its place. And obviously you can't argue with the fact that he's the most popular writer in the world. So I figure I'm going to learn from the guy. Even if I don't enjoy it, I'm going to go home, digest this novel, and try to learn something. And the main thing I came away with, hit home, was how short his chapters are. Often they're a page and a half, 2 pages, literally. Very few over even 3 pages in this particular book. And I added them up. The guy had over 170 chapters in the book. You know, most chapters in a book, kind of a beach read or airport read, quick read, kind of, best-selling novel. Maybe there's 10, 15, 20, 25 maybe. 30 would be kind of a lot. 170 chapters, or I think even more than that, maybe 175. But he does that deliberately. He writes short chapters. He writes in scenes, but it's not even a full scene. It's a scene that's broken up. And I kind of examined a few of them. And, one example would be one scene that most other authors would have as part of chapter 1. And it might not even be the whole chapter 1. They might continue from there and move on. And there might be more to add to chapter 1. But that one scene he had in covering 8 or 10 chapters. And so he'd stop not just at the end of a scene, but in the middle of a scene where it seemed like a reasonable point to move on from. And I don't like this method unless you're comfortable, unless it's natural. I wouldn't want to force it. But, recently there have been articles, there have been studies, actual studies, neurological studies of how people read. And today's modern reader very often skims now. That's what they've concluded. That's a tough thing for we fiction writers to hear that, but novelists, but there's a reality. They skim. They'll tend to read the first sentence and then they'll kind of spot check, the next couple of paragraphs, see if anything appeals to them, see if any words appeal to them, basically. And so Patterson has dialed into this. He's been doing it for a long time. And maybe he had foresight, or maybe that was just his style. But short sentences, short paragraphs, especially, but more than anything, short chapters. So the reader feels like they've accomplished something. That's another psychological tactic. They can read 3 or 4 chapters, and they think, I'm rolling. I've read 3 or 4 chapters. This, they put the bookmark in. They come back, read another 3 or 4. When in reality, most other traditional authors, they wouldn't have even been halfway through the first chapter yet. So they don't feel like they accomplished anything. And I think part of the mentality of today's younger generation, they like to check off tasks. They like to take care of business. They punch things in on their phone and they just take care of tasks. They like the feeling they're accomplishing a list of tasks. And so maybe that is not a bad way to go in today's world if you're comfortable with it, the shorter chapters rather than the extensive ones. The reader feels like they've gotten more out of it. You have more chance to rope them in, because even when they're test reading your book, they go on Amazon and they go and they'll look inside and they test read it. They right away have read through a chapter. So they feel like they've got a sense of they completed something. The one other reason that it makes a little bit of sense is it might help you as a writer. It might take away a little bit of the intimidation. Like you have an idea for a scene, you're in the middle of it, and you don't know how it's going to go. Just break it into little bite-sized chunks and keep stopping it. And then you start with another chapter. You're just effectively just starting up the scene again that you were already writing, but now you're starting with a new chapter. So it forces you in a way to think of one little final sentence or touch where you can conclude the previous chapter and then move on. And so you as a writer now feel, in a funny way, kind of like the reader does it, you're accomplishing a little more too. And you could sit down in a day under this method and write 15 chapters. You could. That'd be, a page and a half, 2 pages. Maybe you wrote, 20 pages. I mean, that'd be a pretty big day for a writer, but you could write 15 chapters, literally, if you really cranked it out in a day. And, that'd be impossible under the traditional method. So it's something to keep in mind. I wouldn't force it. I wouldn't follow James Patterson along those lines, if it's not you, if it's not your natural way of writing. But if you could sort of go either way and you're intrigued by it a little bit, it's something you might consider. Okay.